OMG, as the kids say. Hello and welcome to another tour. I'm gonna take off my mask because I'm not around people. I have the antibodies, I get tested, so chill out. There we go. Now, today we're gonna be doing a tour of Dumbo, Brooklyn. Dumbo, we're in Brooklyn today, this is great. Anyways, this neighborhood is a pretty fancy neighborhood. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel, that would help me a lot. Also, I don't know, go ahead and like it. You're probably gonna like it anyway, so why not just like it on the thing. All right, well, I think we're ready to get started. Me and Phil are gonna start walking. Let's go. So we're walking through Dumbo. Dumbo is a neighborhood that stands for Down Under Manhattan Bridge Overpass. That's all it stands for. What? What a crazy acronym and a crazy abbrev, as the kids say. Now, it hasn't always been Dumbo. It's a very fancy neighborhood today, but it's gone through lots of different, I guess, incarnations, if you will. It started out as just basically land outside of New York City at the time. In the early 1800s, it was bought by a man named Comfort Sands, who thought because it's so close to Lower Manhattan in the city of New York, that he could develop it. So that's exactly what he did. It became kind of an offshoot of New York, kind of like the Wall Street of Brooklyn by the 1820s, etc. People had houses in this area and all that stuff. But then by the mid-1800s, it became kind of an industrial neighborhood because the Industrial Revolution took off and it started to find places where land was cheaper, right? They did this in places like Soho, we've talked about that. So they set up shop here, industry sets up shop here throughout the rest of the 1800s and through the early 1900s. In fact, you have this building behind me. This is the Thomson Water Meter Company building. John Thomson was a man who kind of revolutionized the water meter, and they required water meters in buildings starting in the late 1800s, so he made a fortune. He set up shop here until the 1920s when it was replaced by the Eskimo pie factory. You guys know what Eskimo pies are? You guys know those like chocolate ice cream bars that you're like, oh, I really want an Eskimo pie. You get those tinfoil chocolate bars, you eat like 3 bites and you're like, yeah, I don't really want the rest. It's one of those kind of things. But they were here until like the 1950s, and today it's condos. And that kind of tracks the development of this neighborhood generally. So we're gonna keep walking, I'll talk to you guys about that. So what happened was, this neighborhood, after the industry left in the mid-1900s, it left for other cheaper areas. After World War II, industry left the cities, and it went to cheaper neighborhoods outside of the city, right? And when it did that, neighborhoods like this one suffered. They suffered and they became kind of slums and crappy neighborhoods and no one wanted to be here. And that's when certain people started to take advantage of this. So we talked about Soho in a different video. You should look at that one, sick plug, boing, whatever. Anyways, there are people who take advantage of those types of things, and this is one. Two Trees is a development company started by a man named David Walentas. Now what happened in this neighborhood was all these industrial buildings were still here in the 1970s. This man named David Walentas had some money, he had some buildings, but he wasn't that rich. He borrowed $12 million and he bought a lot of the land here because he had asked around in places like Soho what the next Soho was, right? Because Soho was starting to boom, it was a really cool area, it was the land was flying off the shelves, all that stuff. So he does the same, and people tell him about this little area called Dumbo in Brooklyn. He comes over here, sees that there's nothing here, he buys up as much as he can, and now he's made himself a billionaire off of pretty much just Brooklyn. He actually just recently developed Domino Park over in Williamsburg, but that is his company, his real estate company. So what they've done in this neighborhood is they've repurposed a lot of the industrial buildings, which you see here now, like this one right over here, into condos and office spaces. So these buildings here, you see these style buildings, you'll see a few of them. These pertain to a man named Robert Gayer. Robert Gayer, you're gonna see his name on a lot of these buildings. Not Gayer, G-A-Y-E-R. Robert Gayer, G-A-I-R. All right, so stop smirking over there, you immature kids. Phil's laughing behind the camera. You can see here's his name over here on this building. But he was actually famous for, he was a Scottish immigrant. He came over here at the age of like 13. He fought in the Civil War. Really, really crazy story of a guy. But he actually made a fortune off of corrugated boxes. He invented the corrugated box. You know how you could fold boxes and like open them? It's like what industry uses. He invented that. So he made a killing off of that. And then he built all these buildings in this neighborhood. And they actually nicknamed it Gayersville. Yeah, keep smirking there, Phil. But it's, you can see Robert Gare Company there. And you can also see one of the famous views here. You may recognize this from Once Upon a Time in America. This is a really good view of the Manhattan Bridge, and this is where Dumbo gets its name, down under Manhattan Bridge overpass. I think it was a Jerry Seinfeld interview where he's talking about how the original idea was to name it down under Manhattan Bridge, but that would have just been dumb. Ah, look at that, how funny is that? You can see this great view. People are always lining up to take pictures and stuff here. And the traffic is a nightmare. It's so funny because everyone gets so mad. All the people who are like just trying to drive through the neighborhood, they can't go through, so they always get angry at all the tourists and stuff taking pictures. But there's no tourists right now, so that's not a problem. I wanted to cross here real quick. This is Water Street. We'll talk about Washington Street here in a second, but this is Water Street. I just wanted to point this place out. On Water Street is this really cool place. This is Gleason's Gym. This is a really historic, probably the most historic boxing gym in New York City, and it's right here in Dumbo, and it was located here, before it became all ritzy and everything. But it's been around since the 1950s, not in this exact spot, but it's been around since the 1950s. Jake LaMotta trained there. He's the guy who inspired Raging Bull. Muhammad Ali trained there. Mike Tyson trained there. Pretty sick, right? I actually did a video about Mendez Boxing Gym, which is the gym I used to go to in Manhattan. Sick plug. Let's go. So this is the Manhattan Bridge. The Manhattan Bridge was actually opened in 1909. What happened was the Brooklyn Bridge opened first, right? It opened in 1883. And what it did was it exploded Brooklyn. I think there was around like 580,000 inhabitants in Brooklyn when it opened. And then 15 years later, it almost doubled to 1 million people. So quickly, other bridges were necessary. The Williamsburg Bridge opened next in 1903, and then the Manhattan Bridge in 1909. So what Dumbo is created in between the Manhattan Bridge and the Brooklyn Bridge. It's like this little wedge in between them. And like I said, today this is a very fancy neighborhood. But back then it was very industrial. You're going to see something here in a second, but Robert Gare. This is also where Brillo Pad was invented. The largest ground coffee distributor in the country was here. Really big deal. Now you have Brooklyn Bridge Park. I'm going to wear a mask because I'm heading into this little park. They say to wear a mask, so I'm going to put my mask on. There we go. I'm trying to be So this is Brooklyn Bridge Park. We're going to walk through. You're going to see the views here. It's pretty cool. Views of Brooklyn Bridge. But this park also was partly developed by David Walentas to increase the value in the land that he owns around here, because you forget parks are very, very important to the land value. People, obviously parks are very nice for everybody, but real estate developers know the value of parks. And this is a good example of one, as is, we talked about Washington Square in the Greenwich Village video. That was actually created and created by the city at the behest of a man who owned a lot of land around there. He used his connections and he had it pushed through and into a park. Same thing, the most recent example is the High Line. I'll do a video of that soon. But the High Line is a good example of that, because now that's some of the fastest rising real estate in the city. And it was a result of that same idea. Pretty great view here. You can see this background there. That's the Brooklyn Bridge. I don't know how the lighting is there, Phil. How's it looking?
Pretty solid.
That's the Brooklyn Bridge. You can see Lower Manhattan. We'll get another great view of this here in a second. But you can see how we're wedged between Manhattan Bridge and the Brooklyn Bridge, and this is Brooklyn Bridge Park. A lot of people come down here and they get married all the time. One day, maybe, I'll get married there. I don't know, we'll see. This is a nice little beach here. And then there's the carousel. We're going to walk over there here in a second, but I just wanted to show you guys this view. Very, very cool little view. And over here you have some stores and stuff. You want to pop down here, Phil? Can you do this? Hope you didn't get that on camera. The kid was getting his diaper changed. I don't know if that's the kind of thing we want to be showing on these videos. So like I was saying, this neighborhood was industrial until after World War II, industry leaves. It's a decrepit area. This guy, David Walentas, buys it up, and he repurposes a lot of the industrial buildings to be condos, to be office space. Today, there is still some industry here. The industry tends to be more tech. There's a lot of tech here. In fact, this is the headquarters of Etsy. Etsy has its headquarters in Dumbo. If you guys know that tech company that like people make their arts and crafts and they sell them on Etsy. Also the headquarters of West Elm. You can see West Elm right over there. You can also see here, I guess I take this off because we're outside of the park. You can also see here the Walentas, says Walentas building. It's 1 Main Street. This building here is home to that clock tower up there. That's a penthouse. We'll get a shot of that on B-roll, don't you worry. But that's actually a penthouse apartment. I think it was listed at $25 million the last time I checked. The clock, this clock's on 4 sides and they're actually windows into like this pretty sick living room. It'd be nice to own that. I live with 2 roommates in Queens. Kind of the same thing. Now we're walking up to Water Street. We're gonna take a right. You're gonna see some cool, like, you know, stores and restaurants. This guy named Jacques Torres has a spot right over here to the left. He made a name for himself as a chocolatier, actually. Chocolatier is French. And he actually is Algerian. He learned to make food and everything in Paris. Came over here in the early 2000s. He's on the Food Network now. He has like a pretty popular show there. And then here to the right, you have all the, this is kind of like a shopping mall, huge shopping mall, like Empire stores. And also the Time Out Market is located there. Pretty overpriced, a lot of it if you ask me. I hate to say it, but it's one of the things about this neighborhood. It's very expensive now. It's one of the most expensive neighborhoods in New York City, actually, which is saying a lot. And it's right up there with the most expensive in Brooklyn, actually. So it's pretty impressive what they've been able to do. They just completely flipped this. Now, it's interesting, too, to take into account so Walentas bought this land in '79, and he sat on it, pretty much, because it wasn't rezoned for him to be able to do what he wanted to do until the 1990s. So he had to wait around for a little bit. But once it was rezoned, Giuliani rezoned it, it was just like, and it just was able to, you know, change pretty quickly. Now this building, like most of the buildings in this neighborhood, is a repurposed industrial building. This used to be actually the Arbuckle Coffee Factory. This was right here. This giant building is now offices and the Empire stores. You can see the, you know, the old architecture, the iron stars that kind of keep it together. Those are actually securing iron rods that keep the structure intact. All right, back to the mask. Let's go. Now here we're walking into the park again. And to the left you have an off-Broadway theater. This here is St. Anne's Warehouse Theater. This used to actually be a tobacco warehouse. And it's today an off-Broadway theater. Now, it's off-Broadway, once again, I've said this in other videos, this is a good fact. An off-Broadway theater refers to the size of the production. So a Broadway show just means that it's playing in a theater that holds 500 or more people. An off-Broadway is 100 to 499, and an off-Broadway is less than 100. That's a good fact. You guys better be appreciative of that. So this is St. Anne's, and here we are in the park again. Over here you'll see the Jane's Carousel, it's called. This was put here in 2011. It's called Jane's Carousel because of Jane Walentas, actually. That's actually David Walentas' wife. Interesting story. I read that David Walentas used to, when he owned buildings, this is kind of weird, he used to interview all the female potential tenants. He'd have private interviews with them before letting them rent apartments. That is so creepy, man. But anyways, he used to do that, and he met his wife that way, Jane Walentas, and she bought this carousel at auction. It's from 1922. She bought it, I think, in the 80s. It was actually originally made for a park in Ohio. And they put it here to make this park nice. And it's worked. And the land value has gone up, baby. Not to be cynical, but that's how it's gone. Also, too, an interesting story. You see the view here, pretty cool. Funny story, I was once doing a tour in this area. And I was with like a group of like 15 people. And I was talking about how the neighborhood had changed. I was saying, you know, oh, it's changed, that's good, and whatever. I was mixed of things and just explaining everything and telling the story of Walentas. And there was this guy, this older guy, was like kind of hovering around the group, like looking in and listening. And I was like, what the heck? Eventually, I like kind of wrap up the little thing, and he's like, well, change is good though, right? And I was like, yeah, I guess so. Sometimes it depends on who you ask. And he goes, okay, I'm David Walentas. He puts his hand in to shake mine, and he goes, I own the neighborhood. And I shook his hand in front of everybody, and all the people I was with are like, that's not real. It was definitely him. It was definitely him, and he was just listening to see what this random idiot tour guide said about him. So this park, by the way, is 85 acres total, and it runs down on the other side of the bridge, which we're going to go to. That's where we're going to finish in what is known as Fulton Ferry Landing. And here, of course, you have the Brooklyn Bridge. Now, the Brooklyn Bridge, this is one of my favorite structures in the city, in the world. But this was open. And by the way, I have a video about the Brooklyn Bridge. Sick plug. Sick plug. But this Brooklyn Bridge, you watch that video, but to me, I think it's one of the most amazing structures in the city because it really helped define what New York became. I think there's no other structure in New York that had the impact of Brooklyn Bridge. When this was finished, I mean, it was really incredible what it did. It united two of the biggest cities in the United States. Brooklyn was the fourth largest city in the United States when this combined Brooklyn with New York City. And it was only because of this combination that they eventually consolidated into one city in 1898, which was 15 years after this opened. Designed by John Roebling. John Roebling died while building this bridge 2 weeks after even starting. His foot got crushed on the pier when he was out on the boat scouting out areas. His foot got crushed on the pier, went to the doctor. They amputated his toes. He tried to take care of himself. Afterwards, Phil, you're gonna hit your head on the trees. He tried to take care of himself and they used hydrotherapy. He got tetanus, got infected, gangrene, he died. As genius as he was, he didn't know to take a doctor's advice. But that's a lesson learned. So his son took over. But yeah, it's kind of cool because Washington Roebling took over. And what happened was when they built this bridge, those towers were each built by sinking a giant caisson to the bottom of the water. Then they put all the bricks on top and built the tower on top. It was airtight. So inside were men who were digging so that it would continue to sink until it got to the base, until it got to granite, and then they would fill it with concrete. And then on top was the thing, and they would leave. But the problem was it was so deep that back then they didn't know about this thing that we call now the bends. It's decompression sickness. It's coming out of depths too far and too fast. And the nitrogen in your blood expands, basically creating circulation problems, paralysis, nausea, death. He got a bad case of the bends, and guess who took over in 1871 until 1883, basically overseeing the bridge? His poor wife. Emily Warren Roebling had to take over. Unbelievable. And she was, for her efforts, by the way, let's go this way. For her efforts, she was the first person to cross. She carried she carried a rooster as a sign of a new day, a sign of victory. And they put a plaque on the Manhattan Tower, thanking John Roebling, thanking Washington Roebling, and no mention of Emily Warren Roebling. No justice in the world, right? But they eventually, people will complain, rightfully so, and they put one on the Brooklyn side, basically saying, yeah, she helped too. It's very patronizing, actually. Also, too, you may recognize Dumbo from the TV show Gossip Girl. This is where Dan Humphrey's family lived. I don't know. I don't even know if people watch that show. I think they do. They always ask me about it. I've never watched an episode. You watch that show, Phil? No. What's your favorite TV show? Parks and Rec. I went off the air like 7 years ago. You still watch it?
Still watch it.
All right. Fair, sorry. So we're going to be crossing over now into the Fulton Ferry Landing. Fulton Ferry Landing. You know, people tell me I look like that guy Dan Humphrey. That's the guy who played the Gossip Girl guy.
Really?
Yeah. It sounds. It's me trying to brag. So we're walking here over to what's called the Fulton Ferry Landing. Now I was telling you too that when the bridge opened, a couple things happened. Before the Brooklyn Bridge, they actually relied on a ferry to cross from Manhattan from New York into Brooklyn. So when that ferry was implemented in the early 1800s, it's called the Fulton Ferry because of Robert Fulton, who pioneered the steam engine. It used to cross and it would park right here, and I'll show you where. But it created this whole little commercial area around there because of all the traffic. And what happened was, once the bridge opened, they didn't need the ferry anymore. So because of that, this area kind of suffered. Let's just walk. This is a famous building. This is it's an old Long Island Safety Deposit Bank building. It's a cast iron building. But it's now home to Grimaldi's, which is a very famous pizzeria. And then this was Giuliana's. Interesting story about Giuliana's is the owners of Grimaldi's, when they sold their company, the family, they sold it, and then with the money they made, they opened Giuliana's right next door. Grimaldi's all over now. It's kind of like a franchise. Here to the left, too, you have this warehouse, Eagle Warehouse. This building here, this is the Eagle Warehouse Company and Storage of Brooklyn. This used to actually, well, it was built in the 1890s, 1893, as a storage and warehouse. You can see up there the clock tower there. Another little window in as well, like a fancy room. A lot of those here, but condos now. But this is also on the site of what used to be the Brooklyn Daily Eagle. The Brooklyn Daily Eagle was the newspaper of Brooklyn. People forget that Brooklyn was its own city, like I said before, and had its own newspaper, had its own, pride. And this was a hard thing. In fact, when New York City consolidated as the 5 boroughs in 1898, Brooklyn was actually the last holdout, and it only passed a referendum by like 300 votes. It was very close to not combining at all. Over here you have Shake Shack, another Shake Shack, which by the way started in New York City. 2000, it started as a cart. Danny Meyer, it started as a cart in Madison Square Park, became a brick and mortar store in 2004, and now it's all over the world. So now we're crossing into Brooklyn Bridge Park, a little deeper into Brooklyn Bridge Park. You're gonna see some great views here. One of the best views in New York City. Over here to the left, if you continue on, is Brooklyn Heights. There's the River Cafe, a Michelin-rated restaurant. Michelin-rated means I'll never in my life probably have enough money to eat there. That's all that means. This is where the ferry used to actually come in. You can start to see there are still ferries here now. But you're gonna get a really great view of Manhattan here in a second, and we'll end the tour. It's a quick one. This here is an old firehouse, actually. You see this behind me. This is an old firehouse. This is actually, they used to have fireboats and stuff here on the water. This was a firehouse, 1922. It's now an ice cream shop. I thought she was yelling after the river. She was saying River. That's his name, River. The kid's name is River. Or she said Trevor. I think she said River though, right?
She said River.
Yeah. River. It's an interesting name. It's funny, you go to places like Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and like all the young people, their dogs' names have like people names, and the kids' names have like dog names. It's like, here, check out my, this is my child, Comet, and here's my dog, Charles, or for Francis or something. You're like, oh, okay, cool. Thanks, I should write that down. You can see here some little fields and stuff you can kind of hang out in. Oh, there's a big bell there. People love to run over here. But you can see a great view of the Brooklyn Bridge. Another thing to keep in mind, this bridge, when it was open in 1883, was the longest suspension bridge in the world. 1,500 feet between the two towers, like 500 meters-ish. Just to give you an idea of how small that is today, it's not even the biggest in New York by a long shot. In fact, the Verrazano Bridge that connects Brooklyn to Staten Island is 3 times as long as this one. The span is 3 times as long. Pretty cool view. Well, this is a pretty cool little view here, guys. I guess this is a view of Lower Manhattan. You can see One World Trade Center there, 1,776 feet tall. It's the year of American independence. That's the whole idea behind that. Oh, look at that, 1776. But also the roof of it is 1,368 feet, which is the height of the North Tower of the Twin Towers. Is a way to never forget that whole thing. You have the Woolworth building with the green top there. It was the tallest building in New York for a very long time, starting in 1913 when it was finished. And actually the top is green because of copper, but the copper was taken off during World War II. So they just painted it green. So it's a huge lie is what it means. Also too, you have the South Street Seaport right across the street. You have the municipal building there with the statue on top. You can see that right over there. That's a really cool building that was built to house the offices of the city after it expanded in 1898. I could go on. We could talk about this skyline forever. But I just wanted to take you here. There's a great little view here in Brooklyn Bridge Park. I recommend you guys come check it out if you ever get a chance to. But this area here, very, very nice. Also too though, where we're gonna end the tour, unfortunately. It's very sad, I know. It's very, very sad. I don't know what to tell you. What you guys could do and really help was if you guys could subscribe, that'd be huge. If you guys could help me out, that'd be really, really great. Follow me on Instagram. You know that old thing, me and Phil want to get those trips to, I always just think of Tulum. I think that's where like every influencer goes, is just Tulum. But here you have all this here, it's a great view. Brooklyn Bridge Park, you have the Statue of Liberty back there, you have Governor's Island, you have all these things right here. Yeah, I don't know, we made a quick little tour there. Did I miss anything, Phil?
No, I think you covered everything, man.
Yeah, oh, also too, Dumbo, just so you guys know, is also, this is a quick fact, I forgot to mention it. If you guys remember the song Cruel Summer by Bananarama, that was shot in Dumbo back when it didn't used to look as nice. You know that song, Phil? It's like, it's a cruel, cruel, cruel summer. Gonna be here on my own, it's a cruel. That one? That was pretty good, man. That was pretty good. You know what song I'm talking about, right?
No.
All right. Anyways, all that stuff, we covered Dumbo, great little neighborhood, shows you all the different, I guess, incarnations a neighborhood can go through. Also, too, the abbreviations of New York. Soho is another example, south of Houston. Tribeca, triangle below Canal, which I'll cover another video, wink. Soho, which I covered another video, too, by the way, sick plug. Did I already plug that one? I don't know, I'm rambling. Okay, well, anyways, guys, that's the tour. I'm going to get the hell out of here. Thanks for watching. See y'all later.